Miraculous Ladybug is considered one of the most repetitive shows of all time, with its repetition being one of the key complaints within the fandom. This started around season 3 from what I understand, when all of the original characters and even new side characters had all been akumatized by Gabriel, and it seemed like the only way to move forward with the story was to have characters begin getting akumatized again. Since then, the same handful of characters have been akumatized over and over, leading some fans to feel like nothing ever changes in the show and nothing ever will. The show has been running for 5 long seasons of 26 episodes each that took 10 years to complete. Right now we're getting into season 6, and it's become obvious that the intent is to use 5 more seasons to tell the second half of the story. And it's become obvious thanks to behind the scenes interview that the intent is to run for 5 more years, meaning that this repetitive buildup we've had so far is only half of the story. For people who already feel like the show is repetitive and redundant, this is a bad sign. What they want is some sense of closure, and instead they are told they are getting perhaps another 10 years of the same thing before they get some sort of resolution. I understand the feelings of the frustrated side of the fandom, even if I don't agree with them, because I've had similar complaints about other shows. I don't think anyone really likes filler in shows like these, but there is an art to using what seems like filler to pull off an even bigger story, and I think Ladybug does that with expertise, even if others don't see it. The show had a lot of limitations from the very beginning, first being pitched as an international anime produced in Japan, and later just becoming a limited budget 3D series. Both of these production processes require a large amount of formula. Even higher budget anime shows can rely on a lot of stock footage, and the original Ladybug anime leaned into this with the transformations for Ladybug and Cat Noir that would be reused in every episode, just like in the 3D series we eventually got. Anime already relies heavily on formula in order to make sure that these same scenes get used in every episode, and Ladybug would have as well as an anime. But the switch to 3D from anime seems to be partially because the original distributors of Ladybug want it to be even more formulaic than anime is already known for. When it comes to producing television for children, formula is even more important because it tells the child what to expect. Every single episode of Ladybug has Marinette crushing on Adrian, someone turning into a villain when they have negative emotions, and Ladybug coming in to defeat and heal them. It makes it easy for new kids to get into the show because even 5 seasons in, just watching one episode has you pretty caught up on the dynamics and knowing what to expect. One of the most frequent requests I've seen in the fandom is that they do an episode without the formula. A story involving all of our characters as people that doesn't involve them transforming and using their powers to fight battles. But the networks don't want that. Adults may watch Ladybug for Marinette, as they say, but kids watch for Ladybug, and without her and her formula, kids are less likely to tune in. Kids can handle complex and shifting storylines, but that doesn't mean these shows will draw in long-term audiences bigger than if they just leaned into formula. And so formula is a very safe choice. However, while some fans think the formula makes the show feel repetitive and limited, I feel like its use of repetition and how they play with that is what makes the show so genius. This doesn't mean people have to like it, but it's undeniably an intelligent approach to storytelling, and in particular to the limits imposed on the writers by the broadcasters. This doesn't have to make it enjoyable to anyone in particular, and you can still dislike something while it's still being genius and intelligent for taking what it has and using it in a great way. But its genius comes from blending its limitations with the spiritual philosophy of yin and yang, destruction and creation, dark and light. The thing about repetition is that it has to repeat something to create a loop, and the yin-yang wheel is meant to be a loop itself, spinning so that the light and dark switch sides before returning to where they started. This loop is not seen as just endlessly repeating the exact same thing, but rather the repetition is a bit of an illusion. The cycle of yin and yang is meant to look like a day shifting into night and then back again. But just as days repeat in the week and weeks repeat in the month and months in the year, you find that by repeating this cycle, you inevitably end up growing, even if you seemingly return to where you started. The show has this with every single episode being about a character starting on the light side, yang, and then about halfway through the episode suddenly shifting to the side of yin, the dark. This is the part of the episode where a character gets akumatized, where their negative emotions turn them from a creative person to a destructive person. This ends with Ladybug defeating and healing them, and the healing is seen as part of the process of returning the character to where they began. When they return to their light selves, they return to the light side of the yin-yang wheel, but they now understand themselves better for having gone through the dark side. To put it simply, turning into a villain is therapeutic for the characters. It allows them to destroy a version of themselves that they don't want to exist anymore. anymore. And when they are healed, they are able to become the version of themselves that they wanted to be. But the cycle always ends with them returning to where they began. The old school fans of the show tend to like seasons 1 and 2 the most, with season 3 being where they begin to lose interest, halfway through this 5-season Gabriel Agreste arc. The first 2 seasons had new characters being akumatized in each episode, which actually meant the show didn't have to change its formula or let its characters grow. Every character was disposable, to be used once and then just become a random background piece, instead of an important recurring character in relation to the real formula. This is the illusion of novelty, the illusion of change. The illusion of something new every single week when it's really just the same formula with a slightly different character. Season 3 is where the characters begin to get akumatized again, which is the illusion of repetition, but in fact this is where the show began to stop being so redundant. It's where characters were allowed to make real distinct changes that lasted the entire season or even the entire show. Up until this point, it was hard for me to sit through a lot of the episodes because the characters felt like their stories would never be referenced again in any meaningful way. But this changes when the characters get re-akumatized. Suddenly each character was repeating the yin-yang wheel instead of doing it once, and we started to see how each akumatization is a necessary step in getting them closer to being the person that they need to be. The kind of person who can be a hero and hold the miraculous, or to be the kind of hero that supports the miraculous holders from the sidelines like we saw with all of Paris near the end of season 5. Don't get me wrong, it could also be used just to avoid having a new character, such as in the episode Oblivio, where Alia and Nino were akumatized together because they were caught kissing while playing Super Penguino. It was a funny gag that added to the unfortunately long list of reakumatizations for these characters. One so long that Alia even comments on it when she thinks that Nino gets akumatized again in Centibubbler. My favorite is when all 5 of Marinette's friends get akumatized at the same time when they realize there is some secret being kept from them that is making their friend sad. And it's basically just one big joke about what makes these characters so funny.
Whether she wants to or not.
And she'll keep no secrets from us.
I should do that.
It's in episodes like that where I can feel why people get a bit tired of the same akumatizations, even though I definitely love it myself. It's certainly better when it focuses on that character's emotional journey instead of making them a disposable villain for a greater plot, but those greater plots do still need villains. And it's an important part in the escalation of the formula that turns this from a loop into something of a looping spiral. With the akumatizations repeating, the characters themselves have to change. They need to have their relationships evolve and deal with their issues and acquire new ones. The formula begins to change itself one piece at a time, experimenting with little changes before introducing bigger ones. But just as every episode is its own loop, so is every arc and season, and even defeating Gabriel can be seen as one complete loop itself. This was a battle that took 5 seasons to complete and a journey that took 1 year within the show, one complete loop around the sun. This show started as being about 2 heroes with 2 powers, but we eventually got Rena Rouge and Carapace and a small group of side heroes that Ladybug could call upon to fight in battle. It had our characters becoming villains enough times that they had merited redemption as actual superheroes, and they even learned to conquer and eventually control their emotions to resist akumatizations. But since this is the spinning wheel of yin and yang, she doesn't just get these heroes and that's the end of it. It starts with smaller loops early on in the show where she hands the miraculous out here and there, but in time it evolved to Ladybug relying on the other heroes more than Cat Noir, handing them out in almost every single episode for season 4. And of course when this became the formula, eventually this itself had to change. Because despite what people say, the formula is not redundant, it's used to switch things up. And so season 5 was a total game changer when Gabriel was the one who ended up with all of the powers of the miraculous, with Ladybug only having had them just long enough to understand their powers and figure out their exploitations in order to be one step ahead of Gabriel even when she uses them against her. With this repetitive plotline and it being known that Thomas Ostruck is aiming for another 5 seasons across 10 years, it seems that the next 5 seasons will tell a story very similar to the first 5. One that is a bit repetitive, but with the next 5 seasons being the second half of the show, I believe we'll be going from the light side of the yin-yang wheel down to the dark side for seasons 6 through 10. Seasons 1 through 5 were about Marinette going through a journey to bring her to her best version of herself. And now she has to spin to the dark side of the yin-yang wheel so that all 10 seasons make one complete loop. I expect this to start with Ladybug being akumatized this season, something already foreshadowed in the episode Sublime, with many fans expecting this in the episode Lady Chaos, because that's the opposite of what Ladybug represents, which is order and creation. However, I expect this to just be foreshadowing for even darker turns that Ladybug will take later on in the series. With the Nakumatization at the end of Season 6, perhaps mirroring her becoming something of a villain at the end of Season 10 before Cat Noir and the others can save her. But what do you guys think? I know for a lot of people these explanations don't make the show feel less redundant or any more interesting to actually watch, but it was nice seeing a few comments over the last few weeks of people saying they appreciate what the show is doing even if they don't like how the episodes actually flow from one to the next. But where do you stand? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, or come hang out with us in the Cartoon Universe Discord server where we talk about Miraculous Ladybug and other cartoons. See you guys next time!